Somewhere on Google's servers right now, there's a countdown timer attached to your account, and most people have no idea it's running. Not a hypothetical timer, not a metaphor. A literal policy that Google quietly updated, one that can permanently delete every photo you've ever uploaded. Your kids' birthdays, your parents who are no longer here, vacations you saved up 2 years to take, gone. Not archived, not recoverable, gone. And the thing that really gets me is this. Google told you. They buried it in a policy update and called it communication. So let me show you exactly what's happening, who it's already affecting, and how you get your photos out before the clock runs out. Here's exactly what Google's inactivity policy says, and more importantly, what it doesn't say. Because the fine print is where your photos disappear. Starting December 2023, Google began enforcing a 2-year inactivity rule across all its free products. Gmail, Google Drive, Google Docs, and yes, Google Photos. If your Google account shows no meaningful activity for 24 consecutive months, Google now considers it abandoned, and they can delete it. Everything attached to it, everything you stored in it. Now, you might be thinking, I use Gmail every week, I'm not going anywhere. And for a lot of you, that's true. But here's the part that trips people up. Google's definition of activity is narrower than you'd expect. Simply having the app on your phone doesn't count. Auto-sync running in the background? That apparently doesn't count either, according to the policy language. What counts, according to Google's own support documentation, is things like signing in directly, reading, or sending an email, using Google Drive, watching a YouTube video while signed in. The issue is the word account, because millions of people have secondary Google accounts they set up years ago specifically to store photos, and they never touch those accounts for anything else. They're logged in on a tablet sitting on a shelf. They haven't opened Gmail on that account in 3 years. Under this policy, that account is a candidate for deletion. Security researcher Brian Krebs flagged this as one of the more quietly alarming digital housekeeping policies of the last decade. The Electronic Frontier Foundation raised concerns that users were not meaningfully informed of the change in a way that matched the severity of the consequence. And here's the data point that puts this in perspective. Google Photos hosts over 4 trillion photos. 4 trillion. Even a fraction of a percent of those belonging to inactive accounts represents millions of people's memories, sitting in a deletion queue they don't know exists. Think about what that actually means for you personally. If you've ever handed an old Android phone to a family member and said, just use this Google account I made, that account might be on the list. If you set up a Google account for a child who's now a teenager and stopped actively using it, that account might be on the list. If you backed up photos from a trip in 2019, created an account just for that purpose, and moved on with your life, that account might be on the list. Google sends a warning email before deletion, but only to the email address registered on that very account. So if that address is itself inactive, or if you never check it, the warning lands in a void and deletion proceeds on schedule. But Google isn't running a charity, and understanding that one fact changes how you read every single decision they've made about your storage in the last 4 years. Let's talk about what's really driving this. Google Photos launched in 2015 with a stunning offer. Unlimited free storage for photos. And videos in high quality, their slightly compressed format. Hundreds of millions of people took that deal. They uploaded everything. And for 5 years, Google ate that cost as a growth strategy. The goal was lock-in. Get your photos into Google's ecosystem, make switching painful, make staying automatic. Then, in June 2021, everything changed. Google ended unlimited free storage. High-quality photos started counting against your 15 gigabytes of free storage. And suddenly, all those hundreds of millions of uploads that people had accumulated over years, they were now sitting in accounts that were pushing against storage limits. That shift from store everything free to you're using paid storage created an enormous infrastructure cost problem for Google. Inactive accounts full of data that generates no revenue and requires active server capacity to maintain are, from a business perspective, dead weight. According to reporting by The Verge and confirmed by Google's own policy blog, the inactivity deletion policy is framed as digital cleanup, removing abandoned accounts to improve security and reduce clutter. And there's a kernel of truth in that framing. Abandoned accounts do carry security risks. But let's be honest about what this also accomplishes for Google's bottom line. It frees up storage infrastructure, reduces costs, and quietly removes data from accounts that will never become paying Google One subscribers. When I dug into this and realized the timeline, free unlimited. Storage ends, then 18 months later the inactivity deletion policy launches. It felt less like a coincidence and more like a calculated transition. It's like a storage unit company that offered free units for 5 years to get you hooked, then started charging rent, and then told you that if you stopped paying attention to your unit for 2 years, they clear it out. The assets in that unit are yours, but the terms shifted underneath you so gradually that by the time you noticed, the policy was already in place. Here's what gets me on a deeper level. Google built its entire product empire on the promise of, we'll take care of your stuff. Gmail with its never delete an email philosophy. Drive as your digital filing cabinet. Photos as your cloud memory. People trusted that promise with genuinely irreplaceable things. And I'm not saying Google is evil for running a business, but I am saying you should understand that trust was never symmetrical. You handed them your most personal data. In return, you got a free service built on their terms, subject to change with a blog post and an email to an inbox you might not check. If you felt like something was off about that arrangement, you were right. So let's fix it. Let's get your photos out. And I'm going to give you 4 ways to do this, from the completely free 5-minute option to the bulletproof long-term backup strategy. You don't need to use all 4. Pick what fits your life, but do at least one today. The first and most important step is Google Takeout. This is Google's own export tool, and it's genuinely the most direct way to get a complete copy of your photos off their servers and onto yours. Open your browser, go to takeout.google.com, and sign in with the account whose photos you want to save. You'll see a long list of Google products. Deselect everything, then scroll down and select only Google Photos. Choose your file format. Zip works on every operating system. And set the file size to 2 gigabytes per archive if you're on a slower connection, or 5 to 10 gigabytes if you want fewer files to manage. Click Continue, choose to have the files sent as download links to your email, and submit the request. Depending on how many photos you have, this can take anywhere from a few minutes to a couple of days. Google will email you when it's ready. Download every archive, extract them, store them somewhere physical. Cost, $0. Time to set up, 5 minutes. Time to download. Depends on your library size, but you do it once and you're done. Now, where do you put those files once you have them? That's the second layer of this. An external hard drive is the minimum viable solution. A 2 terabyte external drive costs somewhere between $50 and $80, holds roughly 500,000 average size smartphone photos, and plugs directly into your computer. Copy your takeout archives there, label the drive, put it somewhere you won't lose it. This is your offline backup, immune to account deletions, immune to internet outages, immune to Google's policy changes. Security professionals recommend the 3-to-2-1 backup rule. 3 copies of your data on 2 different types of media with 1 copy offsite. Your Google Photos account was only ever 1 copy on 1 type of media. An external drive gets you to 2. Third option, and this is worth considering if you want automatic ongoing backup without thinking about it. Switch your primary photo storage to a different cloud provider. Amazon Photos, for Amazon Prime members, includes unlimited photo storage at full resolution. That's already included in your Prime membership if you have one. iCloud, if you're in the Apple ecosystem, offers tight integration with iPhone and Mac. Proton Drive, for privacy-conscious users, offers encrypted storage with no advertising model attached to your data. None of these are perfect, none of them are free forever, but they represent real alternatives to putting all your photographic memories in a single Google basket. The point isn't to trust another corporation blindly. The point is to not be dependent on any one provider's continued goodwill. Fourth, and this is the one most people skip, go through your secondary Google accounts right now. I mean today, not this weekend. Open a browser, go to myaccount.google.com, and check which Google accounts you're signed into or have ever created. If you have accounts you haven't touched in a while, sign. Into each one, go to photos.google.com and see what's in there. You may find a library you forgot existed. Export it. Then make a decision about that account. Either start using it actively enough to satisfy the inactivity threshold, or download everything and let the account go on your terms rather than Google's. One quick but important note before we move on. If you're in an enterprise environment using Google Workspace, what used to be called G Suite, your account is governed by different terms, and the inactivity policy works differently. Your organization's administrator controls your data lifecycle, not Google directly. This applies to consumer Google accounts on the free tier and is less relevant for managed organizational accounts. Also, Google Photos' facial recognition, shared albums, and memory features will obviously not carry over when you export raw files. You're getting your original photos back without the Google layer on top. For most people, that's completely fine. If you rely heavily on those features, factor that into which alternative service you choose as your ongoing home for photos, here's what this whole situation really comes down to. You built something irreplaceable inside someone else's house, and the landlord just changed the lease. That's not paranoia. That's just an accurate description of what cloud storage has always been, dressed up in friendly interfaces and reassuring product names. Google Photos is extraordinary software. I'm not going to pretend otherwise. The search, the memory features, the organization, it's genuinely impressive. But impressive software running on someone else's infrastructure, under someone else's terms, with someone else's financial interests, guiding policy decisions, is not the same as actually owning your data. The people who will lose photos in this purge are not careless people. They're people who trusted a promise that was never written into a contract. They're people who handed a tablet to a grandparent and set up an account to make things easy. They're people who did exactly what Google's marketing told them to do. Upload everything, we'll keep it safe. The failure here isn't user negligence, it's the gap between what cloud storage promises and what it actually guarantees. You don't have to abandon Google entirely. Use it for email, use it for search, use it for maps. But your photos, specifically your photos, deserve better than a single point of failure in a corporation that can and does change its terms when the business case demands it. 3 copies. 2 different media types. 1 copy you physically control. That's the standard. Not because disaster is certain, but because the alternative is trusting that nothing ever changes, no account ever gets flagged, no policy ever shifts again, and we now know that's not a bet worth making. You started this video with a timer counting down on your account. Now you have the tools to stop it. Run the takeout export today. Get an external drive. Pick a secondary backup. Check your old accounts. 15 minutes of action protects years of memories. That's a trade worth making. If this helped you protect something important, subscribe so you don't miss the next warning. I cover these policy changes the moment they matter, not weeks later when the damage is already done. And drop a comment. Are you sticking with Google Photos, switching to something else, or going fully offline? I read every single one.